The Radio Forest Podcast.
Hi, Forrest. Don Bellezzo.
How are you doing, man?
Hey, pretty good, buddy. How you doing?
Doing really well. You've got a show coming to Boise Friday, June 21st, Egyptian Theater. Have you guys played here before? Because I know you've done quite a bit of traveling.
We've never played at the Egyptian Theater in Boise, but we have played in Idaho before.
You've done a lot of shows in Vegas, so that's kind of like your guys' stomping ground, so to speak. Would that be correct?
Oh, yeah. It was at the Tropicana and also in Atlantic City, and that's where we met Paul McCartney.
Yeah, so he's kind of endorsed you guys. Tell me about running into Sir Paul McCartney. What was that like? What was the situation, and what did he have to say?
It was at the Tropicana here in Las Vegas. We were doing our show. I didn't even know he was out there. And then at the end, somebody came backstage and asked us if we wanted to meet Paul McCartney. And we thought it was a joke. And we said, yeah, sure. And then he actually came in with a couple of people with him. I guess they were like bodyguards. He started talking to us, and he said how much he enjoyed the show, and that he said we can use his name to endorse us wherever we play. He also gave me the name of his publicist. That was basically it. It wasn't real long chat, but it was very friendly, and we took a couple pictures with him, and then he left.
I wonder how they got him to go to see a Beatles tribute show. Like, you figure like that'd be the last thing that he'd want to do on vacation in Vegas. I mean, that would be a tough sell, I think.
Well, he has the production company named Cirque out of Canada. They have a few shows here in Las Vegas, and one of them was called The Love Show, which was about the Beatles anyway. So he was here for that show. Then I guess he saw that we were playing, and he came over. He was a very down-to-earth guy, very, very nice guy.
Who's doing Paul?
A guy in our group named Rich Fozzie. So it was actually a good thing that we didn't know he was in the audience when we were playing. It probably would have made us more nervous.
Yeah, I would have a hard time. Now, have you had anybody else since then kind of show themselves as being in the crowd, or have seen you guys, or come backstage and say hello?
Well, we've played in the past with several other classic rock artists. We were on the same stage with them. Like, we may have opened for them, or it was a corporate event. We played and they played, like Peter Noon from Herman's Hermits, Gary Lewis with Gary Lewis and the Playboys, the Buckinghams out of Chicago, but nobody like Paul McCartney. We're doing more of the early Beatles when he saw us, and that's what we'll probably concentrate on in Boise. However, at the end, we do throw in a couple later songs that are more, rock and roll oriented, but we basically concentrate more on the early and middle type Beatles songs. It's more like the Beatles live in concert.
How did you first get into the Fab Four?
Well, they were famous before I was born, but then I heard about them and listened to their songs because of my parents. And then when I went to college, I went to Loyola University in Chicago. I used to play the guitar and sing at the pub there on campus. And every time I did a Beatles song, the place went wild. After I graduated, I decided to start a show that would impersonate the Beatles because I saw that there were several different Elvises around. So I thought the Beatles would be good, but it was more complicated because they had to have 4 people.
4 specific instruments, too.
Yeah. So anyway, to answer your question, that's what got me started, really was probably, as a fan, probably my parents.
How has your relationship with the music changed? Because as you get into a band, your first songs that you like 10 years later aren't necessarily still your favorite songs. You like them and they hold a special place. But as you get to understand the band and the catalog more, and the Beatles have very distinct eras. You talked about playing the earlier stuff. They went through different genres, so to speak, of the Beatles. So now that you've been doing it for so long, how has it changed of the music that you've been into and the songs you've been a fan of?
It really hasn't changed too much, very little. I personally still, my favorite album is still A Hard Day's Night. It's not Abbey Road or one of the later, even though I like all the albums, they're all great. But my favorite one's probably A Hard Day's Night.
Kind of what it starts with you has kind of stayed through your entire career?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you then have favorites that you try to work into the shows from some of the earlier stuff? And you did mention you're going to be playing a lot of the earlier stuff coming through Boise.
Yes, we rotate some of the songs occasionally, but mostly stick to the number one hits. If you remember, a CD was released several years ago called One. It had all the number one hits. But then there's some songs that were real famous that didn't hit number one, but they were number two or number three. So we stick to those songs.
Are there any?
Hard Day's Night,
Yeah.
I Want to Hold Your Hand, She Loves You, 8 Days a Week, Ticket to Ride, Day Tripper. I could go on and on.
How long is the show then? Because you're already, half an hour. Well, I guess some of the songs are pretty short.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So how long is the show? Because then that dictates sort of what songs you can add into.
Yeah, we played 28 songs. The show is probably, with a 15-minute intermission, less than 2 hours, probably about an hour and three-quarters. And we also have video and backdrops that go on behind us while we're playing.
In Vegas, can you guys do more of a residency style setup and kind of get more involved? And you got to pare it down for the road trips, or is it one certain style and that's what is yesterday?
Actually, on the road, we can do a little bit more because in Las Vegas, usually there's no break. They just want a straight 75 minutes or 90 at most, and then they want people to go out on the floor and gamble. On the road, we can make it a little bit longer. I'd say it's a little more relaxing on the road, to be honest.
Where all have you taken the show? Have you guys gotten overseas?
Oh, yes. We've been to Japan 7 times, Hong Kong, Singapore, and, of course, Canada, which isn't too far away, and Mexico. But, yeah, we've been to Asia. It's gone real well in Japan, obviously. They love the Beatles in Japan. Another group they really love a lot are the Rolling Stones. That's really popular in Japan, too.
Now, I knew the Beatles were there. I didn't know the Stones were. Other than they're Stones, they're pretty popular everywhere, but they're kind of a bigger hit in Japan than some of the other bands?
Yes. I'd say the Beatles first and the Rolling Stones a close second.
The Stones are touring right now. Have you ever seen the Stones or the Beatles live yourself?
Well, I never saw the Beatles live because I was too young.
Sure, I guess I meant members of the Beatles because McCartney's toured. You got Ringo's All-Star Band.
No, I've never seen Paul McCartney live or Ringo live, and I never saw the Rolling Stones live either. No.
Me and you both, man. How about any big shows you have seen? You kind of a live music buff yourself. What do you like to go do?
Oh yeah, I've seen John Fogerty from Creedence Clearwater. He's one of my favorite. He's great. Occasionally, when I have time, I might see one of the other classic rock acts that come around if I'm in town. The Righteous Brothers. Well, there's only one left.
Right now, Fogerty is on the East Coast. He's touring too, speaking of the Stones. I've seen him a couple of times. I was surprised that he's such a guitar shredder because with CCR, it's like 4 or 5 chords, acoustic. It's kind of repetitive, really simple. And then on stage, I'm like, he's like finger tapping and really going on the electric guitar. I was blown away at how good of a guitar player he is.
Yeah, he's a really good guitar player. He really is. He's good at playing the patterns, but then he can improvise and play lead. And then even more than that, he's got a great voice. He always did. And he's a great songwriter. Very talented guy. He's definitely one of my favorites.
Tell me about the rest of the guys in the band, the Pauls and the Ringos.
Well, there's Rich Fozzie, who does Paul McCartney, Omar Olivares, who does George Harrison, Tony Felicetta, who does Ringo. Several years ago, before we were playing nationwide, we played in Las Vegas. This was before we played by ourselves alone. We played in Legends in Concert. I don't know if you ever heard of that show.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
And then we left that show because you're only one out of 5 or 6 acts in that show, and you only do 15 minutes. So then we just did our own show.
So you have to get somebody that can play the bass, somebody can play the guitar, somebody can play the drums, knows the Beatles or at least can play it, and then somewhat can look the part. Can you make anybody look like a member of the Beatles? Surely you're limited in some ways, right?
Yes, except there's something called the internet, and that's what helped. That's what helped tremendously. If there was no internet, it would have been real difficult trying to find 3 other people.
Beatles fans, yeah.
And also some backups. So it was through the internet that I met different people, and then I ran auditions. So it took some time, but it was mainly because of the internet.
So tell me about the audition process. Was it really tough? Was it a hard pick, or did the guys you're like, man, this is just fitting perfect?
The ones that I picked happened real easily. Yeah, just like you said. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, this guy's definitely a Paul. He's got the look. He's got the high voice. He can play. The Ringo guy, same thing. The George Harrison guy, he plays the guitar parts real well, can sing the harmony parts. Yeah.
The wardrobe for the show in Boise, June 21st. You said a lot of early Beatles stuff. So are you doing the suits, or are there some costume and set changes?
There are some costume changes. We do the black suits, skinny black tie and a white dress shirt, real kind of formal looking like the Beatles. But we have the exact type of suits that they wore, the black suit with the velvet collar. And then we change into Shea Stadium. We wear those tan Shea Stadium coat, you might say, with a black turtleneck.
Thank you for calling in today. It's Yesterday. A tribute to the Beatles is coming to the Egyptian Theater in Boise. It's the first time playing this venue. That show's Friday, June 21st.
Oh, thank you. It was my pleasure, and I hope to see everyone there. Looking forward to it.